My name's Jeff. I'm one of the brewers at Brickway. We celebrated our 3-year anniversary a few months ago in December. So we're just a little over 3 years old. We're both a brewery. We make beer, and we're a distillery, so we make our own spirits. And we normally start the tour here in front of the distillery. You see 2 vessels here inside of the glass. They're both made of copper, and they're both used to distill spirits. Does anybody drink whiskey or gin, bourbon, vodka, rum? Yeah. That all comes from the stills. The first one here is the wash still. So you may have heard of beer wort. It's the base ingredient to make beer. We make beer wort. We make whiskey wash. And so the first one's the wash still. We'll see the brew house in just a couple minutes, but that's the point of origin for the base material, whether the end result's going to be beer or spirits. And so whiskey wash comes out of the brew house, goes to a fermenter. It's fermented with our regular lager beer yeast to somewhere between 6 and 8% alcohol. It's then pushed into the wash still, where a steam coil inside starts to heat it up. That alcohol then evaporates, travels up the stack, and hits a series of rods that we have cold water circulating through. So once that evaporate hits those cold rods, it recondenses into a clear liquid, looks just like water, drips out of the bottom of the stack, and drips in and is collected inside of the spirit still, which is the one closer to the front. I should have mentioned the wash still was made for us in Canada. The spirit still was made for us in Scotland. They were both new with the business, so they've each been in use now about 3 years. On the second day of distillation, then we heat the distillate from the first distillation up in the same manner. That alcohol again evaporates, travels up the spirit still stack, hits the cold condenser rods, recondenses, and with this second distillation, we're able to be very specific about the types of cuts we make in the alcohol that we're keeping. There's 3 types of alcohol that comes off of that, or names for the 3 different parts. Has anybody heard of those, or can anybody recall those? The heads, the hearts, and the tails. And so the heads and the tails are percentages of alcohol that are high in fusel alcohols. They taste a little bit harsher. They don't age as well, and they're kind of famous for making those hangovers really bad the next day. And so those are alcohols that we keep. For the most part, they're discarded. Some of those, though, are added back into the next wash distillation, where they're distilled again, we inevitably miss some of those hearts, some of the best quality alcohol that we're trying to retain. So they'll go through a second distillation then, or third and fourth distillation, I guess, as it were, where they may make the cut then in a distillation down the road. One thing people are often surprised to hear is that regardless of the type of liquor that you're dealing with, it all comes out of the distillery clear. It looks just like water. So when you see a whiskey, a scotch, rum, any of it that has a brown color, that's all from the barreling process that it picks up from the char in the barrel down the road. Not all of our spirits are barrel aged. We sell a white whiskey, which comes straight out of the distillery. And we sell our white whiskey if you're ever wanting to try a whiskey without that barrel age on it. It's an interesting experiment. Surprising how much sweetness there is to it, despite the fact you're drinking 40 to 50% alcohol. Any questions about distillation? We'll touch on it again when we're in front of the brew house, but I just like to stop so that you can see the stills. And so we'll pass in here. The floor's a little wet. I just mopped, so just walk past the brew house if you'd like to stop in the distillery on your way and take a look. I'll turn the light on. So the brew house is back here, and it's tough to see all of it at once, but the first thing we'll talk about is there's two tall silver vessels at the back of the brew house. One of those, the one closest to us, is called the hot liquor tank. There's then a cold liquor tank on the other side of it. There's a lot of examples in brewing for complicated names for very simple things. Those just hold hot and cold water for the brewery and the distillery. Hot water is used, in the brewing process for cleaning. Cold water is used to cool down beer wort, whiskey wash. It's used to cool down those condensing rods we talked about in the distillery. So really, whatever brewing or distilling operations happening at that time, hot and cold water are pretty central.
Is there a chiller of some sort assigned to that chills the water for you?
Yeah, we've got one central chiller. So all of these vessels are Glycol Jacketed. I'm going to turn that music down. Give me just 1 second. Yeah, there's a central chiller up on the roof, and it chills a liquid called glycol, which is just kind of a viscous liquid that holds, retains that cold temperature. But all these vessels are jacketed, so anywhere you see these white insulated pipes, those are glycol jackets, and so the glycol, circulates through, returns up to the roof, gets re-chilled before it's pumped back down, and each vessel has its own set temperature point. And each is equipped with an electronic thermostat and solenoid, which will automatically cycle on and off to control the flow of that glycol according to that vessel's set point. The vessels in front of the hot and cold liquor tank then are more recognizable as the brew house. The one closest to us on this end is the mash tun, and the one on the further end is the boil kettle or brew kettle. I must not have effectively hit the power button on that because the music came back. But we talk about beer wort and whiskey wash. There's 4 main ingredients in beer. Can anybody list the 4? Or any of the 4?
Hops, grain, hops, water, sugar.
Grain, hops, and water. The sugar is effectively the same as the grain because the grain's the source for the fermentable sugar. But yeast would be the 4th one.
Get that wrong.
So that's the 4th. 3 of those with whiskey wash or the base for a spirit or liquor shares 3 of those ingredients. Yeast, water, and grain, or a sugar source, are the 3 ingredients in liquor or what's needed to create the alcohol for distillation. So in the brew house, we produce just that, beer wort or whiskey wash. Whiskey wash being unhopped beer wort, essentially. The process starts by taking malted grain, most of the time malted barley. It can be wheat, it can be corn. Some breweries use rice. There's a lot of different grains out there that can be the source of the fermentable sugars down the road. Again, most of what we use is, you want to turn that down? You're the man. Most of what we use is barley. We use some wheat here. We make one beer with a little bit of corn. We put some lactose in our coffee vanilla stout. Those are really the sources of sugar that we use in this brewery. But all of the malted grains put in a floor hopper. There's a hole in the floor in the corner. That feeds into a hopper downstairs with a mill. So the whole grain is milled just to crack each kernel of the grain, expose the endosperm that's inside, but leave that husk largely intact. And so this leaves us with a kind of a rough crush. The endosperm is what we need to access in order to create an enzymatic reaction in the mash, so that simple sugars can be created and later fermented, metabolized by the yeast to create alcohol. The husk material, though, is still needed. As you can imagine, if you were to fill this mash tun with flour, essentially, and combine it with hot water, you'd end up with a big dough ball. The water wouldn't pass through it. It'd be a mess to clean up, and so that husk material plays an important role in keeping that grain bed nice and light and airy, so that it's passable with water.